second item on the agenda is the Safe Drinking Water Protection Bylaw petition article. And I think we have representatives to speak to that. And since this was a late agenda item, we just ask that you try and keep your comments to around 10 minutes or so.
Sure.
Okay. And could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Good to see everybody again. My name is Bryan Moss. I live at 16 Ruthin Circle in Shrewsbury. So thanks for having me here this morning and have the opportunity to go over the petition article that we had gotten the required over 120 signatures to get onto the warrant for this upcoming special town meeting. First, I think for the benefit of everybody, it might be good to just give some context on why this is back, because I think a lot of people might have some questions in their mind. Back in May in 2015, we had brought forward, or I had brought forward, a petition article to oppose water fluoridation. Specific to water fluoridation, it was a resolution at that time, which required a 50% town meeting vote. Wouldn't formally result in, this is the feedback I had gotten. I learned a lot from that process, where it wasn't really going to enact something. It was more or less going to give the sense of the town meeting, and that different boards could, maybe, listen to or decide upon based on that sense of the meeting. So, learning that and doing a lot of other research and seeing other things coming out about it, I really, came down to the fact of, I think we might be asking the wrong question, or I'm asking the wrong question, because as we look at talking about water fluoridation, we're asking ourselves, is it good? Is it bad? Should we be putting it in our water? Should we not be putting it in the water? And that discussion's been going on since 1952. 1952, when this first got implemented, you can see in the annual town report in the town meeting minutes that there was somebody saying it's good, we should put it in, and there was somebody saying it's bad, we shouldn't put it in. So, when I looked at it a little bit longer, I said, there's something underlying here that I think's important, and that we should be looking at. And I think that thing is that it's not whether we should put it in or what we should put in, because we could be talking about, should we put some other substance in the drinking water? Should, X, Y, or Z? So it really comes down to who should make that decision. I think that's what it really boils down to. Who makes the decision on what substances we should put in our body for health care, preventative purposes? So when I kind of, it's always been in the theme, but it's been kind of something that's mentioned, and then we go on into the discussion of why it's good and why it's bad. And what I found interesting is that there's a lot of recommendations. We should put this in the water. We recommend you put this in the water. But I started thinking about, well, there's a lot of national, federal agencies saying we recommend put this in the water. It's safe and effective. But when I look at that, I say to myself, well, why are they recommending it? And the reason they're recommending it is because the Safe Drinking Water Act at the federal level has a single sentence in it that is very, very important. And I think it was put there specifically to prevent against, from a national level, having anybody decide, hey, we should be putting this in the water for preventative health care purposes. And in that, I tried to, in this petition article, specifically reference the Safe Water Drinking Act, so everybody can go out there themselves and see this line. But under the National Drinking Water Regulations, it says, no national primary drinking water regulation may require the addition of any substance for preventative health care purposes unrelated to contamination of drinking water. So that just means unrelated to contamination of drinking water says you can add stuff to treat the water, but you can't add stuff to treat the people. And so this specific line, really, I didn't know this the first time I came. I had just heard, they can't require it. But as I dug deeper and found this, I was really surprised and happy to see this, because, I think it really shows the intent of that Safe Drinking Water Act is to say, we shouldn't be forcing this. But, it kind of says at the national level. So then if you go to the state level, the state it recommends it, right? The commissioner, the Department of Public Health and Human Services of Massachusetts recommends it. We recommend that you put fluoride in the water. again, it was interesting to me because I'm thinking, you know, if it's, you know, all of the positive feedback on fluoridation, why are they recommending it? Well, they can't require it. If you look at the Massachusetts general laws, they cannot require that they put it in. They leave it to the local level. So they say, you know, if the commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services recommends it to the Board of Health, then to raise the level from whatever it is in the water to the optimal level, which is now 0.7 parts per million, then the Board of Health can issue an order to raise the level from 0.7, from whatever it is to 2.7. And then this is if you're initiating it. And then if they do that, then the people 10% of the population would have to, within 90 days, challenge that order and get a petition and get thousands of people to sign to say, we challenge this, we want to put it on a referendum. And then we'd go to the referendum and people would vote on it. And that's what they've done in Worcester. You've probably seen that many times in Worcester. The Board of Health orders it, the people get enough signatures, they get it in for a referendum, and then the referendum's defeated. So Worcester has been doing that. But what I found interesting, again, the state law is recommending it. It's saying, okay, so the federal government says, we're not going to require it. Go ahead, state or local level. So the state says, we're not going to require it. Here you go, town, Board of Health. It's up to you now. It's up to you to make this decision for your community. So if we look at the town, then we can see that's what's happening today. But then we say to ourselves, let's go down a level, and this is where it gets really, really important. If we go down one more level and say, what about our doctors? What can our doctors do? And this is where the real strong fundamental right you see across the globe is that fundamental right that even the UN and everybody is trying to preserve is informed consent, saying that this. A doctor cannot force, a doctor, dentist cannot force a patient to take a substance for healthcare preventative purposes. They can recommend it, and then that's where an important discussion around informed consent comes. It's not a 2-minute conversation. It's not just sign this document. It's, all right, let's go over the benefits. And we've seen a lot of that, right? We've had these discussions in the town, you know, where people are standing up, you know, giving good reasons why water fluoridation is good and why we should be doing it, and then you have people standing up, here's why we shouldn't be doing it. So you have the benefits, the risks are all being discussed, and then there's some decision made as to do that. Well, in that conversation with your doctor, you have, as you know, as stated in you know, like a dental patient rights would say you have a right to accept, defer, or decline any part of your treatment recommendations. That's just an example as I flip the page. But you have the ability to make that decision. The doctor's not going to force it on you. You can refuse, you know, taking that healthcare substance. So now we're talking about even in a very personal doctor-patient relationship, again, that is prevented by patient rights and ethics from the American Medical Association and other things. So at that level, it's not allowed. And at that level, it's really meant for the individual to make that decision. In the end, the individual makes the decision. I've heard the pros, I've heard the cons. I consider my own medical situation, my own age, height, weight, problems. How is this going to benefit me? But so in that weighing, then if it's decided that I'm going to accept that treatment and take that substance, then I give my informed consent. So that's kind of how I walked it through. And so I think what this petition is meant to do is to preserve that right that an individual gets to make that decision for themselves. Every part of government has, and including the medical establishment, preserves that right. And so for me, I'm going to, for lack of a better word, forgive me, I would call it a loophole, right? I think we're looking, and I'm trying to look at this and say, well, to allow a town to, whether it be a Board of Selectmen, a Board of Health, a Conservation Commission, whatever it would be, for allowing the town to do that, well-intentioned or not, is violating that informed consent part from the individual. It's taking the decision away from the individual, the 30,000 individuals that live in the town of Shrewsbury. It's taking it away from each one of those individuals that would have made that decision or for themselves, and putting it on a board, that would have, let's say, 3 members like the Board of Health. So this, I was looking at the process saying, well, the state said, well, the Board of Health can do it. And when I'm looking at this, I said, I really felt deep inside that it's not about saying we shouldn't do water fluoridation. We shouldn't do this. Of course, I have my reasons for not doing it myself. But in the end, I felt like this could go on forever, right? More research is going to come out. We're going to be back here and talking, and other people, if it's not me, there's other people in town, constantly coming back since 1952 saying, it's good, it's bad, we shouldn't have it, we should have it. But I don't think that's the real question here that we need to answer. I think if we say to ourselves as a town, because, not that I know at any board or town meeting, but when I brought this back for the town meeting, I thought, you know what, let's bring it to town meeting last year and have them make the decision. And now I look at it and I say, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, because that's 240 people now making a decision for the 30,000 people on taking away their informed consent, if they such desired. And then you would say, well, let's talk about a referendum and say we're going to put this in the water. Say 5,000 people come out to vote for that referendum. Well, now that's 5,000 people saying, if the majority of them said, yeah, let's put fluoride in the water. Now they're making the decision and taking the decision away from the 30,000 people. So I felt like there was no good situation to go from there. It's not good to go to town meeting and have a discussion. It's not good to go to a referendum and have that discussion. So really, this doesn't mention the word fluoride at all in the petition article, because this is trying to really say, where do we want this discussion to take place? Do we want to have it at the Board of Health, or is it each individual person? Do we put that discussion back in their hands with their doctor to decide for themselves whether they want to take this substance or not? So that's where I got to this petition. So it actually talks about, takes that one line and just appropriately puts it for our town and says, makes the procedure, no town board, officer, or committee shall require the addition of any substance to the public drinking water supply for preventative health care purposes unrelated to contamination of drinking water. So really what I wanted to do is not to try to put any of my own words in there. I was really trying to just emulate the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act's exact language that they used, that Congress used to say this isn't right to be doing at this level of government. Take that and put it at the town level so that we could say this is something that U.S. Congress has passed. It's been out there for decades. And now, if we put it in our town laws, our town bylaws, because that's our bylaws or town laws, we would be saying that nobody could order this, anything to be put into the water to treat the people. So I'm hoping that people see it that way and feel like we can return the right of the decision making as far as what we take into our bodies back to the individual and not at the level of government. So that's really the description of the petition article. There are reasons why people don't want fluoride in the water, but I think, and there's reasons why people do, but I don't think those are the right questions that we're asking or necessarily the right questions to be answered. But I do believe it's important in the context of the decision. But I think, for today, I think that's, I sent you a lot of information on why, new information on why it may not be important to, why somebody may not want to put it in the water. But if you had any questions on that, I'd feel free to answer it. But I just wanted to leave you with the real intent of the bylaw, which is to return the decision-making to the individual and preserve the right of informed consent.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions, comments from the board?
I have some comments. I don't know if you guys have comments.
Why don't you go ahead?
And so I think you're right. The controversy about fluoride has been around forever. I think we're on different sides of that, right? I think the medical community feels like fluoride's a good thing.
Yep.
I think that there's a large community of people that feel like fluoride's a bad thing. And I think you're right. In May, we sort of hashed through the studies and debated the quality of the studies, the qualities of the science. And I get it. That's not today's question, right? Today's question is, who decides what's good for me? And how do I decide what's good for me, right? And I don't know. I think that's a slippery slope. I do that. I live that world every day in my office. And I don't know the right answer to that. I think maybe people do have to decide that for themselves. And government has made that decision with other things in our food items, right? With folic acid, which is a mineral, with vitamin D, which is a natural vitamin, in milk, in bread products, iodine in salt. So there are other examples of where decisions have been made, presumably in the interest of our health. And so I think the argument would be this is a similar decision. I think the question is really a medical ethics question, and there's different tenets of medical ethics, and this particular example is paternalism. It's the medical community saying, we think this is in the best interest of the public. And your argument is for autonomy. It's one of the other tenets, right? People have the right to make their own decisions. I think it's interesting, through the 20 years of my career, social media has changed their education, their information, their access to stuff. And so sometimes in my office we talk a lot about labor and delivery and how should babies come out and what's the best way. And lots of times patients have lots of opinions about how they want it to go. And it's a hard thing, right? This is, sometimes in that situation I end up saying to people, listen, this is my whole career. And it's a life thing. I absolutely do not want anything bad to happen to you or your baby. So what I'm offering and what I'm recommending is standard of care, not just my opinion, and stuff that we think is in the best interest for both of you guys. Now, you come to me because I'm an expert in this field, right? So there's no gain for me to tell you something that I think is not right? There's no gain. So when I say to you, I think I want to break your water, I have a whole bunch of reasons why I think that's the right thing to do. There's no gain for me to break your water. It's because really medicine and science have said this sort of management seems to end up with the best outcome, right? And then sometimes I say to people, listen, when I go to the car guy and he says, you need new brakes, I don't have a big discussion with him, right? I say to him, can I drive the car home today or do you have to keep it? Like, am I safe to get home and bring it back next week, right? I trust him. I trust that he's giving me the best advice for me. And so I guess some of that is you have to trust in the system, in the organization, in the government, which is actually a little bit hard for me to say too, because the people making these decisions are experts in all of these fields. And the intent is not to patronize, and the intent is not to sound paternalistic, but a lot of decisions that are made for us are because a bunch of experts constantly look at this stuff and they're trying to do what's best for us. So you can take all these decisions back to the individual level, but none of us are experts in it. We all have our own thing we're experts at, but we're not globally experts. So to put it back to the 30,000 people of the community it's a hard thing for me the doctor, not me the Board of Health, not me town member, just me the doctor. It's hard to practice medicine that way, because and it just goes back to the car. I don't think you want me to decide whether my brakes should be done or not. I have to trust that you should tell me when my brakes should be done. Right? I can't read about it. I can't look at my brakes. I have to trust the system is working. And so yeah, it's not about the fluoride itself, it's the bigger picture of the ethics of how we, how government tries to help or not help the community.
And I think to that point, it seems to me the main point you're trying to make is who should decide, and therefore, we're actually talking about basically government or a legislative process whereby you may want to petition the legislature to change the way that these types of issues are determined. In the case of fluoridation, as you know, the original decision to fluoridate Shrewsbury's water came from town meeting, and so town meeting will again decide this issue. So it's not specifically the Board of Health that decides whether or not to do it. If for some reason the fluoridation or town meeting decided to end fluoridation, the Board of Health could bring it back, but it will be subject to a referendum. Therefore, it's not really directly coming from the Board of Health per se. It's really coming more from town meeting, from the Shrewsbury residents. So from a Board of Health perspective today, since our job is to deal with protecting and promoting public health, it sounds like that's not really today's issue per se. It's more of a government regulation type of issue.
I think I just add a couple points. One is that, while I certainly appreciate, the argument that, that the individual should have a right to decide, as a town, we should be able to decide. I just recall back at town meeting in May, town meeting decided on the trash bag, the plastic bag ban. And, again, that's the town telling businesses what type of bag they can sell products in. But I think that's a perfect example of the town making a decision and not consulting, me as a town resident, how I feel about that. And I'm being told now that if I shop in Shrewsbury, I can only buy things and, and I won't be able to get it in a plastic bag. So I think we cede that right of individual decisions on many areas to our government, whether it's the Board of Health, whether it's the, town meeting, or the Board of Selectmen. So I don't, so I think as Maria said, it can be a slippery slope if we start saying, well, we're only going to let people decide this on a referendum basis. I didn't hear many people calling for a referendum on the trash bag ban back a few months ago. And I'm not sure that would be a good use of town resources to have a referendum on that.
Any other comments on this issue?
Do people in the audience want to? Or do you want to open it up to that?
Well, I think our challenge here is it's not a public hearing.
No. So, yeah, I think it's best just to leave it the way it is.
Do we make a formal, do we let Bryan know what our formal response for Bryan? I think Board of Selectmen for Finance Committee is probably going to want to hear what Board of Health says. Is this the time for that?
Well, I believe that we most likely will not have another Board of Health meeting before town meeting, so we probably should vote on a recommendation so that we have that available to
I think so.
town meeting and to the Finance Committee and so forth. So, somebody want to make a motion on a recommendation on the petition article?
Or where do we all stand?
Yeah, I'm comfortable making a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'd recommend that the bylaw not be passed. I'd recommend against the bylaw, passage of the bylaw. If you want to do a resolution, that you recommend.
But I agree with that, so if that's a motion, then I would second that.
Okay, so motion would be that we issue a recommendation against the passage of the Safe Water Protection Bylaw petition article.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the